Hello there guys, it's Joey and this video is the YouTube Pagan Challenge top 10 witchcraft / pagan books. And before we get into the list, there's a little bit of catching up to do, and then there's a little bit of talking about some of the choices for the books and why they have been thus chosen. Before we get into all of that, there were almost no videos, if not no videos last week, and basically I felt the need to have a bit of a pause, a bit of a breath. There's a very emotional wave, I guess, in the world right now, and it's all politics and how that affected me and impacted me, and I basically felt the need to just take a breath away from publicly being on video. I didn't want to give in to any feelings of anger or unsettledness, or emotionally and empathically picking up on a lot last week and still this week, and it's still very difficult, but I felt that last week we needed a bit of a breath before we went on and created anything positive in the pagan stratosphere, I guess, of YouTube. And so I'm going to start this week with this video as a catch up to YouTube Pagans, and if I have time after this one, depending on how long this one is, I'll do the influencers one as well. So before I get into the top 10, the top 10 Joey books of witchcraft, I don't know what this is. Right, anyway, sorry, it just felt very much like a 50s game show or something again. I don't know what it is with game show jingles with me right now. It's something weird. Anyway, I have chosen some books, and some of them are more novel-esque, more fiction, although they do have an impact with regards to paganism or witchcraft that I feel quite strongly, so I've included them. I've chosen some different books too, books that have been seen before, because I have done like some books that I really enjoyed in the very beginning. That's already a video on the channel. I Can't Witch Without Books, I believe. So it will be in the I Can't Witch Without series in its own little folder. You can go check that out if you wish. And on that note, I may be transferring I Can't Witch Without onto the blog, and I have a spell that I'm going to upload to the blog tomorrow, hopefully, and that will coincide with I Can't Witch Without. So I'm in two minds. I may make a video and then have spells for the I Can't Witch Without on the blog, and that kind of ties them together maybe, and then you can find everything via the blog because I'll link it all. So yeah, so there you go. Right, so the first one is actually on my iPad only, which makes me a traitor to book kind. I'm fully aware of this crime. However, it was so much cheaper on the iPad than it was in real life that it was such a steal for the price it was. I can't remember what price it was, but I remember seeing it on Amazon, and I was like, Kindle download, yeah, right this second. So I hope you can kind of see. This is The Plant Spirit Familiar, Green Totems, Teachers and Healers on the Path of the Witch by Christopher Penczak, the forward by Judica Isles, both of whom I enjoy very, very much. There you go, maybe you can you see that a bit better? Oh god, that's the camera going. Right, okay, I'm going to actually move that because the underglow is delicious. Not at all. So I really do quite enjoy a lot of Christopher Penczak's books. I really enjoyed his Temple series. I enjoy his style of writing. I enjoy the way he presents a lot of information. Not a big fan of some of his wording with regards to ritual, but I guess that's kind of a personal thing, because I think a lot of very standard witchcraft rituals kind of make me go, you know, it's a little bit on, I don't know. Sometimes when listening to other people's rituals, it doesn't feel quite right to me, and I don't know if it's because I feel like proper full-on ritual is something maybe that I'm quite secretive about, so I'm not fully comfortable with hearing other people perform big scale rituals in public and things like that. Maybe that's a solitary thing, I don't know, and that kind of transfers to reading some of the written verse. Or maybe I'm a Virgo snob with my verse and just like my verse, because I'm quite a control freak with my own practice, and I like having the verses that I've written. I like having for example, when I call the 4 quarters, and I've said this before, so apologies if you're rehearing this, but I've always used trees, and I never was taught this, I just did it. And I remember going onto a forum very, very early on in my practice, and we were all talking about it, and I was like, well, I don't know where it comes from, but I use trees, and for example, I use an oak tree for the summer, for the fire. I have cherry blossom for air in the east and new beginnings, and then there's a great big pine, sometimes naturally decorated. I vary up a little bit with the pine in earth for, you know, north and winter, and then willow for west, water and the thing. And that's how I've always done it. That's how I feel closely akin to that. That makes sense to me, and it's just something I've always done. But I've never read about it. So I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of a personal hick when it comes to reading witchcraft books and pagan books, that sometimes the poetry is not the greatest. There is an exception to this rule within these books. Now, excuse me, I'm just sitting on something that was very uncomfortable. I'm going to point out now that there's cheated a little bit. There was one on the Kindle, and one is technically a pamphlet, and 3 of them are kind of novelty and not like how-to, but I think it's kind of important to include them in the overall fabric of things being read and taken into a witch practice. Let's start with the novels then, so we can then move on to the more hands-down witchcraft books. So the first book that I had to include with this is Witch Child by Celia Reese. I've been told I look like her, but more than that, this book was a big impact on me in my teenage years, and it's about a granddaughter of a witch who has witch powers herself, and she makes to the New World. She goes to America in time of Salem, and it's gripping, and there's sort of a Native American influence. There's a sequel called Sorceress, and I've owned 2 or 3 copies of Sorceress, and every single time they go missing, it's the weirdest thing. This is the original copy that I had. This has not left ever, and it had a big influence, a big impact, and it's diary style, but it's amazing. It's amazing. It's just gripping from start to finish. And why has this got anything to do with being a witchcraft book, apart from obviously that she's a witch and there are witchcraft trials, and you know, there is mentions of witch hangings and different kinds of witches in different kinds of walks of life, from 1659. It's the other one, the 1660 then. No, it finishes in 1660. I was right, good, okay. So this kind of combines a love of history, which, if you didn't know, I studied history up to degree level, and I've always loved history and learning about the past and so on and so forth. And, you know, the Salem witch trials, amongst other witch trials, are obviously a point of fascination. But it combines a love of history with a love of witchcraft, and so they talk about sort of scrying in here. And then there's kind of a Native American influence, and a little bit of their spirituality comes into it a little bit. It's just a wonderful book, and it really influenced me very early on, and has stayed with me the entire time. So that's Witch Child. The second one that is a novel is A Witch Light by Susan Fletcher. I couldn't get the sticker off this book, so apologies for that. again 1692, so a little bit later. Corag, a wild young girl living in the mountains of Scotland, has been imprisoned as a witch. Terrified in a cold, filthy cell, she awaits her fate of death by burning until she is visited by Charles Leslie, an Irishman hungry to question her. For Corag knows more than it seems. She was witness to the bloody and brutal massacre of Glencoe. But to reveal what she knows, Corag demands a chance to tell her true story. It is a tale of passion and courage, magic and betrayal, and the difference that a single heart can make to great events of history. So again, there's a persecution element. There's talking about witchcraft, there's talking about being judged, there's talking about pain and suffering and sacrifice. This one is a very emotional book as well. They both have an element of darkness and survival and strong female protagonists. I guess that's all I need to say about that. I enjoy strong female protagonists. I enjoy overcoming adversity and difficulty, so I guess they speak to me on a soul level. The final one's a little bit different, and wow, this is a worn copy. I've just seen all the cracks in this. Right, okay, so this is Ovid, Metamorphoses. Metamorphoses. Metamorphosi. Metamorphoses. See, what my brain did there is like, look, Joey's intelligent. She reads an intelligent book. Let's mess the word up. That just about says it all. Just having a look through some of the highlighted sections. Right. Oh, that's a good one. Right, I'm going to hold it there. Right, so Ovid. I wonder if it even says when ancient Greek. I don't know the exact time period of when. Okay. Ovid was born 43 BC. Ovid publishes his first work of Herodias. Oh no, it's gone. What's okay? So when's Metamorphoses? There. 2 AD. Okay, so why did I include a classic literature book of it's poetic epic work maybe, or poems? It's within discussion about witchcraft, because this is from the classical mythology, and it obviously doesn't necessarily on the surface of things pertain to why this has anything to do with witchcraft, well, or paganism, unless you obviously follow some of the Greek or Roman gods, in which case it might have different meaning. I don't, obviously, but for me, Metamorphosis is the name of the game when it comes to witchcraft. It is a big part of what witchcraft is. I feel that there's an alchemy to witchcraft. We create and affect and influence change, and we want metamorphosis from one thing to another, whether we're engaging in spell work or personal work in order to transform a situation. That's what we're seeking through the catalyst of witchcraft. Witchcraft is a tool to affect and influence change. So his great works are all about states of change. Some of them are very real states of change, things literally changing, and then some we have like the death of Orpheus. Now Orpheus, if you don't remember, we were talking a little bit some time ago about the tragedy of Orpheus to do with Hades. And actually there's a little bit of a precursor to each here explaining why it's a metamorphosis. So we return to the famous minstrel, this description of style of a messenger speech in a Greek tragedy of his violent death at the hands of Maenads must remind us of the death of Pentheus. Orpheus's head floating downstream, taken from Virgil, and then the crossing of the sea allows Ovid to contrive a short metamorphosis of the snake which attacks it. I wanted to read the one about Medusa. Because that's really good, and I'd highlighted that one. 1 second, I'm going to see if I can just flip through and find it. I thought I'd left a note in here, but I clearly haven't. Because, you know, prepared, that's the name of the game. I've got all the books ready to go, but apparently we're not prepared enough to have remembered to put the bookmark in. Okay. No. Alright, well, we'll go with the death of Achilles then. Because I think that, you know, the death of Achilles, the death of a hero, the death that was foretold and fated are some key themes. This is very Greek tragedy, you know, the allotted fate, and it's kind of a good closing point to recent topics which we talked about, because on my channel we've talked about the Norns and fates. We talked about Hades as the god of death. So, and we've talked a little bit about heroes in that process. But the god who rules the waves with his trident grieved as a father for Caecunus, the son whose body he changed to a swan, like Plaethon's friend. He detested the cruel Achilles so much that he crossed the bounds of civilized conduct to vent his implacable anger. The war against Troy had now dragged on for about 10 years when Neptune strongly appealed to his long-haired Smithian nephew, Apollo, the one of my brother Jupiter's sons whom I love the best, who joined me in the building the walls of Troy unrewarded. Do you heave a sigh when you look at these towers so soon to fall? And we'll skip a little bit down here. But since I may not engage with my foe directly, I ask you to shoot an invisible arrow to catch the brute unawares. Apollo agreed. His wishes exactly accorded with Neptune's. So Neptune would be the Roman version. And then of course Achilles' heel, and so on. Anyway, if I spend too long on this book, because I can get a bit lost in Ovid and all the ideas of metamorphosis and change. No, stop reading it, we've got other books to do. Right, what other books have we got to do? I think they're all of a similar vein, so is that. So let's do these two next, okay. You'll probably notice that there are many books coming up which are quite hedge witch, green witch, herbal witch inclined, but the first two are not. So this is another Christopher Penczak book, The Witch's Shield, and I've included this because I've had a few questions lately about books that are really good for protection work, and this is perhaps the most concise one that I have ever read. He has some really good recipes in here. It's a little bit more direct and to the point in his protection work. It's not quite as flowery language, which is preferable. And he has some really wonderful solutions. And in this book, though I've never bothered to use it, is a CD as well of protective meditations. So you get a CD of that as well. Let's find a good. Oh, right, there we go. And so here, see for example, there's a section on protective amulets, and there's a recipe for a protective charm. For example, this is I've had this book for a long time. From when I used to make notes from books like this. 2004. I've had this book since 2004. there are children the same age as this book. That's, or as long as this book has been with me anyway. So this is a really wonderful book of protective work, and it combines some astral, energetic approaches, as well as talking about, you know, the first chapter deals with, is psychic attack real, and looking at psychic attack and what it actually is, versus some things that get in the way, such as denial and paranoia. And then it talks about psychic hygiene, cleansing, and it goes through spiritual body, physical body, emotional body, mental body, and soul body. And then we go on into protection, going through symbols, stones, herbs, grounding techniques, psychic techniques, and physical techniques of banishing and things. So this book is a really wonderful book for protective energies and sort of finding a good counterbalance to psychic attack, because in a lot of psychic attack books it's kind of based on a, yeah, it's real, so here's some shit you can do about it. But this book actually addresses looking and making sure you're not actually psychically attacking yourself because you think you're being attacked, and it kind of has a little bit more of a balanced level-headedness to it that I do enjoy from most of Pagan's books. I am going to say here, before I move on to the next book, which is a Morrigan book, I don't particularly care for his Morrigan book. I didn't enjoy it, and I remember not getting very far through it. I was really disappointed because all of his other books I've really enjoyed. So, a Morrigan book, of course. So the Morrigan book, which I have enjoyed of late, and I have a whole video about this book, so I'm not going to go on for too long, but it's The Great Queen, the Book of the Great Queen by Morpheus Raviana. It's a really, really good book. It's really quite a thick book. It's a thick book. Look at all the knowledge going into my ear. No. And it's based on, there's a lot of lore and discussion of the mythos, and some really, really interesting topics of how the mythos can be interpreted. It is an extensive analysis of the literature, historical and archaeological records of the Morrigan and the Celtic societies in which he was first worshipped. It's very in-depth, it's very, very good, so I highly recommend that book. So the next 4 technically, because one's a pamphlet, but there we go, are all very much based in kind of the green world. The green world, the world of the trees and the plants and the nature divers. So the first one is this. It is Grimoire of the Thorn-Blooded Witch by Grimassi. Some people really don't like a lot of Grimassi books, but this one, I really enjoy this one. And there's sort of a... Grimassi takes on a persona of an old world witch, more old world witchcraft, more perhaps than some of the other books that are included here. He has a very traditional way of looking at witchcraft, and some people disagree with him on his points. However, in this particular book, it's all to do with the connection, the interconnection of the world around us, and particularly plant spirits and devas. It's very much like the Pengsak Plant Familiar book in a lot of ways. I don't mind Grimassi's writing style, his language style. What's a good one? And there's some really interesting imagery in this book as well. There you go, Aconite. So we'll read for Aconite, the Call of Enchantment. You are she of that most feared in the night. Moonless eve in forest or brightest in moonlight. The dread of life or the fear of death in the deep wooded places all come to rest. Teacher of shadowed things, old mysteries abound when moon is drawn and lies upon the ground. The witching cup is passed at the hour in between. She of the white round rises, all know her as their queen. Come to the thorn-blooded witch who hails, I call you to pass through the verdant vales. I reach out from time-honoured power by seed, sprout, blooded leaf and flower. So yeah, I mean, it's all based around the idea of the thorn-blooded witch and the... I've forgotten what he calls it. Talking about the Greenwood Realms. The Rose and Thorn Path, that's what he calls it. And this talks about exchange, about the nature of sacrifice, about the nature of creating contacts and interlinking energies with nature spirits, and it talks about the building of a relationship with the natural world around you. Grimarty does focus on roses firstly and perhaps primarily over some of the other energies of plants, but he does include other plants, including some of the banefalls, which can be a rare occurrence because in a lot of witchcraft books they are kind of hesitant to even talk to you about the banefalls and the energies that they possess and connecting with the plant devas, possibly on, you know, covering their own arses so you don't go poison yourself and blame the book. But Grimarty does cover the banefalls, and as such I found it a really interesting read. The next one is Witchcraft Medicine. Again, I have a whole video about this book, so I'm not going to go on in great depth because I have already talked about this book in particular, and that's why a couple of other books aren't on this list, because I've talked about them more than once within a video. So I did prefer Wolf-Dieter Stoll. I remember that quite clearly, and his essays, because there's actually 3 of them. Claudia Müller-Eberling, Christian Richts and Wolf-Dieter Stoll. And can you tell I studied German? I hope you can. So his section, The Wild Earth and Its Children, The Old Woman in the Hedgerow, The Witch's Shaman, Midwife's Fertility and Birth, and The Mother of Death, sorry, covers, and it's a witchcraft book which focuses very much on plants and the witch relationship to the natural world. It sometimes does deviate outside of that a little bit, has kind of a historical slant again, draws from historical reference points, archaeology, the written word, source material from history basically. It's really wonderful, and what does it claim to do? The authors take the reader on a journey that examines the women from centuries past who mixed the potions and became the healers. It talks a little bit about Hecate, the sorceress and shaman, the plants associated with witches, seasonal festivals. Yeah, I wish they wouldn't do that in all the books. I'm just sick of Sabbats being in every single witchcraft book. They also look at the history of forbidden medicine from the Inquisition to current drug laws, which is really good. That's a really wonderful part of this, like how certain plants have become illegal and against the power of society and things like that. That was wonderful reading. Right, so the last 2 are by the same author. One's a pamphlet. That's kind of cheating. But this is a lady whose work I do love and I have loved a long time. And that is Glennie Kindred. So the pamphlet is The Sacred Tree, and obviously it focuses on tree magic. It focuses on tree magic with the slant of the Ogham, and the Ogham is the Celtic, Druidic, Ogham alphabet, and they are also used in magical practice. And they are associated with a tree each, which if you've been with me any length of time, you know I have a whole series on it. So for example, here we go, here is Willow Sail. Mustn't sing sail. And the thing about this, even though it's a pamphlet, is it has concise, wonderful information coupled with some of the loveliest, almost doodly but not quite, illustration. I love Glennie's illustrations. They're just beautiful. Let's find a good one. I mean, we're going to look at her book in a minute, but oh, that was a good one. Look at the fern. It's lovely. So I'm recommending this because it talks about each of the Ogham and the trees, It has a good amount of information. It talks about the wood and its uses and its healing properties. You can also get the Ogham pamphlet, which I could not find for the life of me. I don't know where I've put it. I don't know. I put books places and I'm like, I'll find them at some point. But when I need them, they disappear. It's just, you know, the fae in this house. So that's the first one. But secondly, we have her Earth Wisdom, which I may have mentioned before. But this is a heartwarming mixture of the spiritual, practical and proactive. Glenny Kindred, you're amazing. You're amazing. She doesn't seem to get enough love as far as I've ever seen in a lot of the... Look at some of this imagery in, you know, when people are talking about books. I love Glenny Kindred. Right, so let's talk about her book with regards to Rowan. So we have... Here we go. And she talks about the tree, the Ogham, its planetary ruler, growing Rowan trees, sorry, folklore and legend, and then the wisdom of the tree. The Rowan is also called the quickening tree. There you go. The wood and its uses and how to make a healing wand or touch wand. Then it talks about the herbal and edible uses, the berries, the healing properties, the lovely imagery and art imagery that you have already seen. So it does this from a lot of the trees. It's not in a very specific order. She kind of has a cyclic nature within this book. The idea of the flow through this book is like it's flowing through the year. So she will associate certain sabbats or certain times of years with certain trees, and when they're perhaps they're most potent with regards to their berries or their woods, or perhaps when the Ogham is associated with a particular month. And it has a very cyclic nature, a very interesting mesh of folklore, healing and witchcraft with regards to Earth Wisdom. And then there are parts which aren't even to do with trees because, you know, Earth Wisdom. So we have bits here that are caves and standing stones and some meditations. It talks a little bit about space clearing, shrines and altars, winter solstice, and it all comes from like an earth-based path, and it's just gorgeous. Wells and springs. That's older trees. And then she does talk about mapping your locality and getting to grips with your local people, with your local spirit davers and so on and so forth. It's a beautiful book, beautiful book. Right, so those are a selection of my top 10 witchcraft pagan books. Again, you know, I decided to swap some in and some out, so we sort of featured some that I really enjoy because I have 4 bookcases full of witchcraft and witchcraft related books, so I have a fair few to choose from, but I'm a bookworm, and I mean worm like a dragon. So W-Y-R-M, just in case anyone's like, what? What are you talking about? What nonsense are you on about now? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll stop because clearly I'm going slightly crazy at the end of this video. But I hope you enjoyed this video about witchy books. Many blessings.